Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Darse Quran Hakim by thinker of Quran, Allama Ghulam Ahmad Parwez. Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 208 to 214. Dear brothers, today is May 11th, 1969. And in the new series of Quranic lessons, the discourse begins with verse 208 of Surah Al-Baqarah. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu dkhulu fis silmi kaffa. 208. Review of the previous lesson. In the previous two verses, two groups were mentioned. The first group, listen to their speeches, read their statements, look at their resolutions, they astonish you. At every breath they repeat God, the Messenger, the Quran and Islam. And you are convinced that they are devoted servants of the Islamic system. But the Quran says, وَإِذَا تَوَلَّى, as soon as power falls in their hands, they forget everything and begin to spread disorder. When told to uphold God's laws, their hearts feel the truth, but false prestige prevents them from reform. Their end is the destruction of hell. In contrast, the second group are those who sell themselves to God, surrendering their lives for His purpose. As verse Women and Nasi man yashri nafsahu ibtigha amardatillahi declares, they dedicate themselves so that God's will may be fulfilled, so that His throne of justice and order is established on earth as it is in the heavens. They give themselves entirely for this purpose.
The nature of deen is to enter fully and collectively. After explaining the previous points, now the address is to the community of believers. The Quran says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu udkhulu fis silmi kaffa. 2:208. This is a great fundamental directive which separates deen from mere religion. The translation is, O community of believers, enter into silm, the system of peace, security, and completion. This system guarantees every kind of safety and harmony. You must enter into it. But here one word is crucial. Kaffa. This reveals the essence of deen. Kaffa has two basic meanings. First, to enter something completely, not partially, but wholly. Second, kaffa also means a community. Thus, the command is not to enter individually, but collectively. This collective dimension is what defines deen. Religion is individual. Each person performs rituals, gives charity, holds personal beliefs, and fulfills the demands of religion individually. But deen is not like this. In deen, it is essential to join the collective of the truthful. Wakunu ma'as sadiqin, 9:119. It is essential to bow together with those who bow. Wa'arka'u ma'ar raki'in, 2:43. Deen is a complete system, not partial. In the Quran, the address is never to a single believer, but always in the plural form, directed to the entire community. It is وَالَّذِينَ مَعَهُ, those who are with him. Deen is the name of a collective system, and such a system cannot be divided into parts or fragments. It is not possible to say that if one acts upon a portion of it, even 20%, then that is sufficient. This is not a matter of percentages. As an example, if a doctor prescribes a formula with 6 or 7 ingredients and you decide to take only 4 of them, thinking majority is enough, it will not benefit you. In fact, it will harm you. The doctor knows that the combination of all ingredients in precise measures and sequence produces the intended cure. Similarly, in the system of deen, every component has its place and importance. Just as in the functioning of a machine, every part is essential, so too in deen, every directive must be implemented fully. If you accept only half the laws of a state and ignore the rest, the system collapses. This is a scientific formula. Only when taken in its entirety does it yield results. If you attempt to apply it partially, it fails. For instance, water is formed when oxygen and hydrogen combine in a specific ratio. If you say, I have already taken 50% oxygen, that should be enough, and drink liquid oxygen, you will see what happens. It will not produce water, but destruction. Interference in the system of deen is shirk and self-deception. In the Quran, deen, the system of life granted by God, is presented as a complete formula. Consider hydrogen and oxygen. Hydrogen burns, oxygen supports combustion. Yet when combined in a precise ratio, they produce water, which extinguishes fire. This is what a system means. Its components cannot be separated. To divide the system into parts is self-deception. The Quran commands, "Udkhulu fis silmi kaffa." Enter into the system of peace and security wholly and collectively. Only when the entire system is established will it yield its results. It is true that such a system cannot be completed overnight. One may begin its implementation gradually, but the ultimate goal must remain its full establishment. At any stage short of completion, one cannot claim to be living under Islam. Rather, one can only say that efforts are being made towards the Islamic system. When kaffa, the whole community, adopts and enforces it, then life will truly be in accordance with Islam, and only then can one be called a believer or part of the community of believers. To take one command of the Quran and ignore the rest, and then claim to have acted upon the Quran, is the essence of religion in its fragmented form. But deen is not partial, it is totality. The method of organizing the system of deen. As I have just explained, no formula or system can be broken into pieces. The Quran makes this very clear. Look at two commands in the same surah, expressed in identical words. Kutiba alaykumus siyam. Fasting has been prescribed for you. You see how strongly this is observed. Just a few lines later comes, Kutiba alaykumul qital. Fighting, struggle, jihad has also been prescribed for you. Yet for the second command, a specific group is separated out, as if this duty is only for them. But why not do the same with fasting? Why not say, let a few people fast? That will be enough. The words are the same, the form of the command is the same. This shows how deeply we must reflect on how these directives are applied in society. Both commands are given to the entire community of believers. For fasting, the Quran itself mentions conditions, those who have the ability and strength. But still, the command is for the whole community. In exactly the same way, Kutiba alaykum al-qital is also a collective obligation, not something to be confined to a separate group. The Quran presents deen as a complete system of life. To break it into fragments is both shirk and self-deception. Consider hydrogen and oxygen. Hydrogen burns, oxygen supports combustion, yet when combined in a precise ratio, they produce water, which extinguishes fire. This is the nature of a system. Its components cannot be separated. The Quran commands, Udkhulu fis silmi kaffa. Enter into the system of peace and security wholly and collectively. Only when the entire system is established will it yield its results. It is true that such a system cannot be completed overnight. One may begin its implementation gradually, but the ultimate goal must remain its full establishment. At any stage short of completion, one cannot claim to be living under Islam. Rather, one can only say that efforts are being made towards the Islamic system. When kaffa, the whole community, adopts and enforces it, then life will truly be in accordance with Islam, and only then can one be called a believer or part of the community of believers. To take one command of the Quran and ignore the rest, and then claim to have acted upon the Quran, is the essence of fragmented religion. But deen is not partial, it is totality. The Quran exposes the hypocrisy of those who selectively follow divine law. It says, do you know what they used to do? First, they expelled some of their own people through oppression and aggression. When enemies captured them and they became prisoners, their religion taught that freeing captives was a great act of virtue. So they would collect funds, ransom them, and feel proud that they had earned reward. But the Quran asks, وَهُوَ مُحَرَّمًا عَلَيْكُمْ إِخْرَاجُهُمْ. Was it not forbidden for you to expel them in the first place, to put them in a state of oppression? You violated this law and then sought merit by freeing them. Thus the Quran declares, أَفَ تُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْضٍ. Is your condition such that you believe in part of the book and reject the rest? This selective obedience is not deen, it is distortion. In the mindset of religion, people imagine that whatever portion they act upon will be credited to them, as if keeping a debit-credit register. But the Quran makes it clear that the matter is not according to human assumptions. The one who gave deen declares, فَمَا جَزَاءُ مَنْ يَفْعَلُ ذَلِكَ مِنْكُمْ. Whoever among you does this, what will his outcome be? The answer is illa khizyun fil hayati dunya, disgrace and humiliation in the life of this world. And further, وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ يُرَدُّونَ إِلَى أَشَدِّ الْعَذَابِ, and on the day of resurrection they will be driven to the most severe punishment. Where then is the idea of 50% obedience being enough? In Deen, the command is kafata, wholly, collectively, completely. Religion may allow partial practice, but Deen demands totality. Human-invented divisions versus divine system. The Quran explains through historical evidence, showing how people distort divine law. It mentioned a case of Bani Israel, and now the question arises, what do we do? Every day you hear people say, poverty and wealth are in God's hands. He makes whom he wills rich and whom he wills poor. That is the first claim. Then, in the same breath, they say there should be a system that removes this division. But reflect. When two children are born, does one arrive with a checkbook and the other empty-handed? No. Neither comes with gold on his back or a bank balance. Both are born naked and equal. The divisions of wealth and poverty are not created by God. They are created by human systems. Then comes the contradiction. If poverty is removed, if no one remains needy, how will charity and almsgiving continue? How will people earn reward through giving? Thus, they argue that a permanent class of poor must exist so that others may gain merit by giving to them. This is a glimpse of human self-contradiction when they step away from the laws of God and invent their own notions. The most fruitless act in the world. The Quran addresses those who think charity alone fulfills their duty. It says, you create poverty by maintaining a permanent class of needy people, and then you give them alms, believing it to be a virtuous act. You stand them in the line of beggars, hand out coins, and feel satisfied that you have done a great deed. But the Quran declares, فَمَا جَزَاءُ مَنْ يَفْعَلُ ذَلِكَ مِنْكُمْ إِلَّا خِزْيٌ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. Whoever among you adopts this method will face disgrace in this worldly life. And indeed, despite the vast sums spent on charity, donations, and offerings at shrines, the result is humiliation. Today, Muslims as a collective are among the most degraded nations on earth. The Quran's warning is clear. Partial obedience and reliance on charity without establishing the full system of Deen leads only to dishonor in this world and severe punishment in the hereafter. The Quran says that the deeds of those who act without establishing the system of Deen are wasted. أُولَٰئِكَ حَبِطَتْ أَعْمَالُهُمْ. There are two kinds of futility. One is when no action is taken at all, and the other is when action is taken but it yields no result. This is the condition of the community. In terms of effort, they are not lacking. Consider fasting alone. In the scorching heat of May and June, with days stretching 16 hours, people observe fasts with great discipline. You see how sincerely those who are called Muslims undertake this, believing it to be a source of immense reward. These are arduous practices carried out with devotion. Yet despite such effort, the Quran declares that when the system of Deen is not established, these actions do not bear fruit. They remain without result, because the collective system is absent. Future success depends on present success. In terms of expenditure, as mentioned earlier, vast amounts are spent. Yet every act results only in increasing humiliation. Where is the promised reward? When asked, the self-deceptive answer is given. The reward will come in the hereafter. But the Quran says, خِزْيٌ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا, 285, disgrace in this worldly life. And further, وَيَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ يُرَدُّونَ إِلَى أَشَدِّ الْعَذَابِ, 285, in the life to come, even more severe punishment. Oh, dear ones, if the present is filled with humiliation, how can the future suddenly become radiant and glorious? Reflect on this. The reality is exactly as the Quran states, أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْضِ, 285. In our society, the only example of discipline and system that remains is within the army. Outside of it, in daily life, there is no order, no system. Here, we do not have kitab in the sense of kutiba alaykumu. It has been prescribed upon you. What is declared as obligatory is left to personal choice. People say, if someone fears God, he will observe it. If not, it is his own matter. If a person does not fast, no one can compel him. He says, this is between me and my God. If I fast, I gain reward. If I do not, I face punishment. But when there is no system, this is what happens. Compare it to where a system exists. For example, in the army. If a soldier does not appear when the bugle sounds, what happens? There, kutiba alaykumu is enforced. If he says, I tied my bootlaces but did not fasten my belt, deduct 20 marks today, it is not accepted. In a system, parts cannot be separated. A rifle may be clean, oiled, and ready, but if it has no bullet, it is useless. In a system, partial compliance is meaningless. That is deen, indivisible, comprehensive, and binding. Without collective system, parts have no value. What you have is religion, not deen. Religion is self-deception. Deen is truth tested by results. In deen, every command produces visible outcomes. If a community faces khizyun fil hayati dunya, disgrace in worldly life, then it cannot be the community of believers. This is the Qur'an's judgment. Why is this so? Because the Qur'an commanded, Udkhulu fis silmi kafa, enter wholly and collectively into the system of peace. When the complete system is established, even the smallest part will produce results. Just as in machinery, even a tiny screw has value when the whole machine is assembled. But if all the parts are scattered on a table, they yield nothing. If one screw is missing, the machine rattles. If all parts are joined, it works perfectly. That is the meaning of kafa. Enter into the system wholly. If this collective system is absent, then what remains? The Quran answers, وَلَا تَتَّبِئُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ. Do not follow the footsteps of Satan. Dear friends, listen carefully. Many have abandoned the present life and imagined another life of religion worship, thinking that is enough. But the Quran says clearly, وَلَا تَتَّبِئُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ. Do not follow the footsteps of Satan. This is plain truth, though our hearts resist it. Why? Because the false paradise we have created in our minds collapses when confronted with reality. We live like children. A child's toy breaks and his world falls apart. We too have fashioned toys of religion to soothe our minds.
The child insists his clay horse is real. When it breaks, he cries, my horse is gone. He believes in fairies and finds comfort in illusions. But that is childhood. When he grows up, he laughs at the idea of riding a clay horse. Yet the tragedy is that while the child outgrows his illusions, the father continues to ride his clay horses all his life. This is the state of religious self-deception, clinging to illusions instead of establishing the living, collective system of deen. These are the clay horses that the deceptions of religion hand over to man. Na dukh chai, na dharma ras ai, magar khapte dawa hai, aur main hoon. Life passes in this cycle, charity, almsgiving, rituals, and people believe they are earning reward. But the Quran says, وَلَا تَتَّبِئُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ إِنَّهُ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ مُبِينٌ 2:208. This is the greatest enmity. A nation works hard, spends much, imposes restrictions on itself, yet every new dawn brings fresh humiliation. That is open hostility. And then comes the reality. It is not like the wealth of a grandfather that, once earned, continues to sustain generations. The system of deen is not a wind-up clock that, once set, runs endlessly. It requires continuous effort, collective organization, and vigilance. Only then do results appear, and only then can dignity replace disgrace. The Quran warns, فَإِن زَلَلْتُمْ مِن بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَتْكُمُ الْبَيِّنَاتِ. If after clear signs and proofs have come to you, you slip away, then remember, أَنَّ اللَّهَ عَزِيزٌ حَكِيمٌ 2:209. This means that even if you establish the system after receiving guidance, but then abandon it, God's grip is firm. He is Aziz, the one with absolute power and authority, never rendered helpless. He is Hakim, the one whose methods of enforcement are full of wisdom and precision.
The attributes at the end of verses are deeply significant. Here, Aziz and Hakim remind us that God does not simply withdraw after giving commands. His sovereignty remains, and his accountability is inevitable. The system of Deen demands vigilance and continuity. Once established, it cannot be neglected without consequences. The nature of divine accountability. Brothers, this is a subtle but profound point. When we speak of God's grip, we often imagine it in our own terms. We say, look at that tyrant, he keeps committing injustice. Why does God not twist his wrist? Why does the hand raised to stab the oppressed not turn to stone? We want God's attribute of Aziz, absolute power, to manifest in this way. But the Quran says, Anna Allaha Azizun Hakimun. He is not only powerful, he is also wise. His accountability works through the law of mukafate amal, the law of consequences. His grip is not arbitrary, it is bound with wisdom and reason. People desire a dramatic intervention. هل ينظرون إلا أن يأتيهم الله في ظلل من الغمام والملائكة وقضي الأمر. They imagine God descending in clouds, riding a chariot of the sun, surrounded by angels, destroying the oppressors with his own hands. This was the imagery of earlier nations, found in Jewish texts, Greek mythology, and Hindu traditions. But the Quran rejects this notion. Divine accountability does not come through mythological displays. It comes through the law of consequences, through the system God has established in the world. His power is real, but it operates with wisdom, not spectacle.
Results based on the law of consequences. The Quran explains that the method of divine accountability is not the mythical intervention people imagine, but the law of mukafate amal. It says, "Wa ila Allahi turja'ul umur." All matters return to God. Every action, every deed, moves towards its outcome according to his law. The question then arises, how do results manifest? The Quran immediately presents the historical testimony of Bani Israel, whose story was well known to the Arabs. The Jews were present among them, and their history was before everyone's eyes. When Bani Israel established the divine system, they broke the powers of Pharaoh, Haman, and Qarun. They gained sovereignty, enjoyed the glory of Solomon and the prestige of David. They rose to the ranks of the most powerful nations. But when they transformed Deen into religion, fragmenting the system while keeping its parts scattered, they fell into disgrace. The Quran, supported by historical truth, declares that they became the most humiliated nation on earth. Thus the Quran says, Sel Bani Israel, ask the children of Israel. Do not look to the sky expecting God to descend in clouds. The evidence is before you. This degraded nation itself is proof of how God's law of consequences brings about the downfall of those who abandon his system. The condition of Muslims in light of the Quran. Dear friends, the Quran once said, Sel Bani Israel kam ataynahum min ayatin bayinatin. Ask the children of Israel how many clear signs and laws were given to them. Their story was already detailed in the Quran, so here it only points to their fate. It explains, وَمَنْ يُبَدِّلْ نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَتْهُ. Whoever changes God's blessings after they have come to him, then فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعِقَابِ. God's retribution is severe. When they followed divine law, they received all comforts, prosperity, sovereignty, and honor. But when they fragmented Deen into religion, they lost it all and became the most humiliated nation. If the Quran were revealed today, it would say, ask the Muslims, just as it once said, ask the children of Israel. Because Muslims too were given clear guidance, sovereignty, and blessings, yet by turning Deen into fragmented religion, they have brought disgrace upon themselves. The Quran generalizes this principle in Ibrahim 14:28-29. أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِينَ بَدَّلُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ كُفْرًا وَأَحَلُّوا قَوْمَهُمْ دَارَ الْبَوَارِ. Have you not seen those who replaced God's blessings with ingratitude and led their people into ruin, into hell itself? This is the image. A caravan leader who, instead of taking his people to a flourishing market, leads them into a wasteland where no one values their goods. That is the fate of nations that abandon Deen for religion. The root cause of humiliation, turning Deen into religion. The Quran explains that the disgrace and downfall of nations comes when deen, a complete collective system, is fragmented into religion, a set of rituals and personal practices. It says, Jahannama yaslonaha, wa bi'sal qararu. This is hell, when a caravan leader takes his people to a marketplace where their goods have no value, leaving them in ruin. That is humiliation in this world. Khizyan fil hayat ad-dunya, 285. This happened to Bani Israel, and today the same condition is visible among Muslims. The law of consequences, mukafat amal, is unchanging. Inna Allaha shadidul iqab. God's retribution is severe. Why does this happen despite clear guidance? The Quran answers, Zuyina lilladhina kafarul hayatid dunya. Worldly life is made alluring to those who reject the system. Success is measured only by wealth, status, political power, or social prestige. To be the neighborhood chief, to win elections, to gain favor in the court of rulers, these become the ultimate goals. Thus, the blessings of God are exchanged for ingratitude, and nations fall into disgrace. The Quran's message is timeless. Without the collective system of deen, rituals and charity alone cannot prevent humiliation.
Humiliation of the sincere in a hellish society. Even in corrupt societies, there remain individuals who value honesty, integrity, and moral principles. They strive to live with faith and sincerity. But what happens to them? The Quran describes, وَيَسْخَرُونَ مِنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. The people mock those who believe. They ridicule the honest, calling them foolish, saying, look at these naive ones who claim to live with integrity. See what happens to them. Their mockery is not because honesty is wrong, but because acknowledging it would expose their own corruption. To admit that truthfulness is right would create an inferiority complex within them, making them feel degraded. So, to justify their own way of life, they invent excuses. This is the world, and it must be lived by worldly means. Religion is separate. I pray, I fast, I give charity, I cook food at shrines. That is enough. The false glamour of religious illusions. This is the essence of Zuyina lilladhina kafaru al-hayatu dunya. Worldly life, even when diseased like leprosy, appears adorned and attractive to those who reject the system of deen. They justify their corruption with religious rituals, and when they see someone striving for honesty and faith, they mock them. وَيَسْخَرُونَ مِنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, 2:14. But the Quran immediately shifts perspective. وَالَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا فَوْقَهُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ, 2:14. This is where misunderstanding crept in. People translated it as, let them mock now, on the day of judgment believers will be above them. While the hereafter is real and our faith in it is firm, the Quran's concept of al-qiyamah is broader. It does not only mean life after death. Qiyamah literally means to rise, to stand, to establish. It refers to the establishment of truth, justice, and the divine system in this world as well. When that system is established, those who mocked the believers will see them rise above, socially, politically, and morally. The great error was to confine Qiyamah only to the afterlife. That misunderstanding allowed people to tolerate humiliation in this world, thinking dignity will come later. But the Quran insists, when the system of deen is established, dignity comes here and now, and the believers stand above.
The foundation of destruction and the true way to remove it. The Quran defines al-Qiyamah as the era when humanity rises collectively for the establishment of God's universal order. Yawm yakumul nasu li rabbil alamin, 83:6. This is not merely about the afterlife. It is about the moment when people stand up to implement the system of rububiyyat in this world. Today, hardships fall upon individuals who try to live honestly within a false system. Their sincerity cannot create a separate sphere of dignity because the environment itself is corrupt. The Quran makes it clear, salvation is not achieved through isolated individual effort. If everyone compromises, the possibility of establishing deen vanishes. The cure lies in collective uprising. When humanity rises together to build the divine order, that is al-Qiyamah. It is the transformation of society from falsehood to truth, from humiliation to dignity. This rising is not a personal escape, but a communal revolution, the only way to erase the destruction caused by turning deen into fragmented religion.
The Quran emphasizes that those who suffer under false systems are often sincere individuals living honest lives. Their mistake is not dishonesty, but isolation. They remain scattered, each one enduring hardship alone. If these truth-loving, integrity-driven people were to adopt the kafata approach, collective unity, their strength would become immense. In corrupt societies, the dishonest, the violent, and the exploiters are always organized. They form groups, create schemes, raise funds, and operate under a system. Their numbers may be small, but their unity magnifies their impact. By contrast, the peace-loving and honest majority live individually, each confined to his own home, thinking, if trouble comes, what can I alone do? This fear is precisely why a handful of troublemakers can terrorize entire cities. Reports often show that the actual number of agitators is tiny, perhaps 40 or 50, yet they dominate because they are united, while the honest majority remains fragmented.
The life and death of nations depends on collective systems. This is the inevitable outcome of living life in isolation. The Quran addresses those who wish to live honestly and faithfully, reminding them that this is not merely a matter of religion, but of deen. It commands, وَكُونُوا مَعَ الصَّادِقِينَ, be with the truthful. This is a call to gather, to unite, to form a collective. There has never been an era devoid of such sincere individuals. The Quran calls the one who raises this voice a munadi, the herald. Why? Because he must proclaim loudly, O people of truth, O people of honesty, where are you? Come together. If life were meant to be lived individually, there would be no need for such a call. It further says, Warkunu ma'as sadiqin, bow with those who bow. Join the community that submits to God's laws. History proves this principle. A handful of united believers at better, though few in number, overturned the might of entrenched empires. The centuries-old powers of Caesar and Khosroes collapsed before them. Their strength lay not in numbers, but in unity under deen. But when they abandoned Kunuma Asadakin and scattered into isolated individuals, religion replaced deen. The result was decline, humiliation, and weakness.
Collective life and the true meaning of mahshar. The Quran teaches that the rise and fall of nations depends on their collective system. When people live scattered, each one isolated, they remain weak. But when they gather together under truth, their unity becomes a force that transforms history. This gathering is what the Quran calls mahshar. The word itself means to assemble. When humanity stands united for the establishment of God's order, it is described as يَوْمَ يَقُومُ النَّاسُ لِرَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ 83:6, the day when people rise for the Lord of all worlds. That is al-Qiyamah, the collective uprising for justice and truth. In false systems, the sincere are mocked and marginalized. But when the divine order is established, the Quran declares, وَالَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا فَوْقَهُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ 2:12. Those who preserved eternal values rise above those who chased worldly gains. The transformation is not only moral, but material. The Quran says, وَاللَّهُ يَرْزُقُ مَن يَشَاءُ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ 2:12. Sustenance flows in abundance beyond calculation. History bears witness. When the system of deen was established, resources poured in so greatly that people could not even comprehend their measure. The example of Abu Huraira bringing the Khurasan revenue illustrates this. The figures were beyond the numerical grasp of the Arabs of that time. The system built on truth brings unlimited reward. The Quran says, وَاللَّهُ يَرْزُقُ مَن يَشَاءُ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ 2:12. The meaning of without account is not that God gives randomly without measure, but that the abundance is so vast it surpasses human imagination and calculation. When a nation establishes its system on the lines of divine law, resources flow in such magnitude that people cannot even comprehend their extent. History illustrates this. When Abu Huraira brought the Khurasan revenue, the figures were beyond the numerical vocabulary of the Arabs. They did not even have words for numbers that large, yet the wealth was real and present. This was the manifestation of بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ, sustenance beyond human reckoning. Such prosperity arises only when truth-loving people unite, when they rise collectively to establish the system of deen. In times of disunity and fragmentation, this vision seems distant. But the Quran reminds, كَانَ النَّاسُ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً
2:12. Humanity was once a single community, and it can become so again when it gathers under the divine order. Humanity's early unity as ummatin wahidatin. The Quran states, Kanan nasu ummatin wahidatin, 2:12. In the beginning, humanity lived as one united community, without divisions or sects. There was no conflict of identities, no fragmentation. All were bound together in a single collective life. Then it says, فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ النَّبِيِّينَ مُبَشِّرِينَ وَمُنذِرِينَ, 2:13. At this stage, God sent prophets as bearers of glad tidings and warnings. The purpose was not to create divisions, but to preserve unity and guide humanity with divine law. The superficial reading suggests that prophets introduced sects, that before them there were no Jews, Christians, Magians, or Muslims, only one community. But the Quran's deeper meaning is that prophets came to maintain the unity of mankind by providing divine guidance. The divisions arose later when people distorted the teachings and turned deen into fragmented religion. Thus, the verse points to the truth that humanity began as one and is destined to return to unity under the system of deen. Prophets were sent to remind and guide, while the real cause of division was human distortion of divine law.
Understanding Quranic truths through tasriful ayat. The Quran itself provides the method to understand its realities. Tasrif ayat, cross-referencing verses to clarify meaning. It does not repeat every detail in one place. Instead, it explains a concept in one passage and elaborates it in another. To grasp the full truth, one must bring these pieces together. The usual practice has been to recite from Al-Fatiha to An-Nas for reward, treating the Quran as a book of ritual rather than guidance. But the Quran insists it is for understanding, and its method is tasrif ayat. For example, in Al-Baqarah it says, Kana nasu ummata wahida, humanity was one community. To see the fuller picture, we look at Yunus, وَمَا كَانَ النَّاسُ إِلَّا أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً فَاخْتَلَفُوا. Here the Quran adds that humanity was indeed one, but then they differed. This shows that divisions were not original, they were introduced later. And since these divisions arose from human deception and misuse of intellect, human intellect alone cannot resolve them. The Quran's guidance is necessary to restore unity. Human intellect alone leads to ruin. Every individual's intellect teaches him how to protect his own interests. The landlord's mind tells him to lock doors, hide wealth, and secure property. The thief's mind tells him how to break locks, forge keys, and sneak in at night. Both are guided by intellect, and without it, neither could act. This is the battle of wits. Whoever is more cunning wins. The Quran explains that humanity was once one united community. وَمَا كَانَ النَّاسُ إِلَّا أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً فَاخْتَلَفُوا. Divisions arose when intellect, driven by selfishness, created conflicts. Since these conflicts were born of human deception, they could not be resolved by intellect alone. Therefore, God sent prophets, فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ النَّبِيِّينَ مُبَشِّرِينَ وَمُنذِرِينَ. They warned that living by selfish intellect alone leads to destruction, and they gave glad tidings that living by eternal values under divine law brings prosperity, peace, and dignity. This shows that intellect, when detached from revelation, produces division and ruin, but when guided by revelation, it leads to unity and flourishing.
The Prophet as the light of revelation. The Quran explains that prophets were not mere preachers of sermons. They were given a complete framework of law. وَأَنزَلَ مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ بِالْحَقِّ, 2:23. This book was based on truth, unlike human-made laws which are shaped by interests and deception. Every society has its own codes. Even thieves and bandits devise rules for their operations. But the Quran emphasizes that the divine book is bil-haq, founded on absolute truth. The purpose of this book was لِيَحْكُمَ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ فِي مَا اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ, 2:23. Where human intellect created divisions and conflicts, the Prophet, through revelation, established a system that resolved disputes. He did not merely advise, he implemented justice, set up governance, and gave binding decisions. This clarifies the Prophet's position. He was the establisher of a divine order, not just a moral preacher. The culmination of this process came with the final messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was Khatam an-Nabiyyin. The Quran itself declares, وَتَمَّتْ كَلِمَةُ رَبِّكَ صِدْقًا وَعَدْلًا.
God's word was completed in truth and justice. لا مبدل لكلماته. No change can be made to it. It is a complete, immutable, and preserved system. God assures, وَإِنَّ لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. Thus, the Prophet's role was to introduce human intellect to the lamp of revelation, and the Quran remains the final safeguarded code of law for humanity. The Quran's decision on Nabi and Rasul. After the completion of revelation, there remained no need for another prophet or messenger. This is the essence of Khatamun Nabiyyin, the seal of prophethood. The endless debates about whether Khatam is with Zabar or Zer are distractions. Once it is accepted that the Quran is complete, immutable, and preserved, then the matter is settled. Later, a distinction was invented, that a Nabi comes without a book, while a Rasul brings a book. This led to the claim that prophets could still come, but without scripture. The Quran itself refutes this. It declares, وَأَنزَلَ مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ بِالْحَقِّ 2:13. Every prophet was given the book with truth to judge among people in their disputes. The Quran does not separate the two roles. The finality of prophethood is confirmed in the Quran. وَتَمَّتْ كَلِمَةُ رَبِّكَ صِدْقًا وَعَدْلًا 6:16. God's word has been completed in truth and justice. لَا مُبَدِّلَ لِكَلِمَاتِهِ 6:16. No one can alter it. And إِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ 15:9. God himself will preserve it. Thus, the Quran closes the door on further prophets or messengers. The distinction between Nabi and Rasul is a human invention, while the Quran's verdict is final. The system of guidance is complete, immutable, and eternally safeguarded. The Quran itself resolves the debate about the difference between Nabi and Rasul. In Al-Baqarah it says, فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ النَّبِيِّينَ وَأَنزَلَ مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ 2:23. Here the word an-nabiyina is used, and it clearly states that the book was sent with them. In Al-Hadid it says, لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلَنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ وَأَنزَلَ مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ 57:25. The same wording is used for Rasul. This shows that the Quran does not distinguish between prophets and messengers in the way later thought did. Both are described as receiving the book. The idea that a Nabi comes without scripture while a Rasul brings scripture is contradicted by these clear verses. The reality is that the two words describe two aspects of the same mission. Nubuwah refers to receiving revelation from God, while Risala refers to delivering that revelation to the people and establishing a system based on it. They are two sides of the same coin, two functions of the same individual. With the completion of revelation, the role of receiving divine guidance from God, Nubuwah, came to an end. The Quran was delivered in full, preserved, immutable, and complete. There is no need for further prophets because the book is already in the hands of humanity. The Quran itself declares, وَأَنزَلَ مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ بِالْحَقِّ 2:23. The book was sent with truth, and لِيَحْكُمَ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ فِيمَا اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ 2:23. Its purpose is to judge among people in their disputes. This is the function of Risala, to implement the book, to establish the system of justice, and to resolve differences according to divine law. After the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, the responsibility of Risala, in the sense of conveying the Quran and establishing its system, shifted to his ummah. His sunnah is to build a society on the foundation of the Quran. Thus, while Nubuwah ended with him, Risala continues through the collective duty of the community to uphold and implement the divine order. The Quran remains until the day of resurrection, safeguarded by God himself, complete, unchangeable, and eternal. The high stature of prophets and their mission. The minds of subjugated nations could not even conceive how revolutionary the program of the prophets was, nor how great the transformations they brought. Those who were called Nabi and Rasul did not come merely to preach sermons or fold hands in prayer. They came to overturn false systems and establish truth in their place. Their role was to resolve disputes, لِيَحْكُمَ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ 2:13. They received revelation, established systems, and gave decisions in matters of conflict. In their order, there was no division, no sectarianism, no fragmentation. The Quran itself declared sectarianism to be shirk. وَلَا تَكُونُوا مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ مِنَ الَّذِينَ فَرَّقُوا دِينَهُمْ وَكَانُوا شِيَعًا. Thus, the Prophet's mission was to unite humanity under divine law, abolish divisions, and build a collective system of justice and truth. The Quran on sectarianism and its cause. The Quran declares that those who create sects are counted among the mushrikeen. The purpose of revelation was to unite humanity, not to divide it. Thus, the question arises, why did divisions appear? The Quran answers, وَمَا اخْتَلَفَ فِيهِ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ أُوتُوهُ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَتْهُمُ الْبَيِّنَاتُ بَغْيًا بَيْنَهُمْ. The differences were not due to any deficiency in the divine message, which was clear and complete. They arose because of selfishness and envy among those who had received the book. It is not the Quran that produces sects. The Quran is Qal Sadid, firm, truthful speech. Its nature is clarity and guidance. If a book were such that contradictory interpretations could legitimately arise from it, that would be its greatest flaw. But the Quran is not flawed. It is human desires and distortions that generate divisions. Therefore, sectarianism is not justified by the Quran. It is condemned as a corruption of divine unity, born of human motives rather than divine teaching.
Sectarianism and the Quran's verdict. The Quran identifies the root of sectarianism as Baghyan Bainahum, 2:13, the inner urge of aggression and rivalry, the desire to overpower one another. It was not a flaw in the divine teaching, which is clear and complete. The flaw lay in human selfishness and hostility. History bears witness to the destructive consequences of this mentality. In Baghdad, rivers of blood flowed in the streets over disputes as trivial as whether the Quran was qadim, eternal, or hadith, created. Sectarian zeal turned minor differences into battles, with each group claiming superiority of their ancestors and traditions. The Quran clarifies, فَهَدَى اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا لِمَا اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ مِنَ الْحَقِّ بِإِذْنِهِ. Those who truly believe are guided by God to the truth in matters of dispute. The book itself contains the guidance. Those who seek sincerely are led to unity, while those driven by rivalry fall into division. Thus, sectarianism is not the product of the Quran, but of human arrogance. The Quran remains a source of clarity and guidance, while sectarian bloodshed stands as testimony to the destructive power of Baghyan Bainahum.
Personal ego and the misuse of the Quran. The Quran says, وَاللَّهُ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ, 2:1-3. The meaning of men yasha'u is not arbitrary selection, as if God chooses some for guidance and others for misguidance without reason. Rather, it means whoever sincerely seeks guidance, God grants it through the Quran. The condition is that one must not be driven by baghyan bainahum, rivalry, ego, and the desire to dominate others. When the Quran is approached with sincerity, it becomes a source of unity and clarity. But when it is used as a weapon in debates and sectarian disputes, it is reduced to a tool for ego. The desire to defeat opponents, to prove superiority, and to parade victory corrupts its purpose. History shows how this mentality distorted religion. Instead of establishing justice and truth, people celebrated those who won sectarian debates, even elevating them as heroes. The example of processions and titles Ghazi Asim for someone who merely insulted rivals in a debate illustrates how far the community strayed. The colonial system remained intact, injustice prevailed, yet sectarian quarrels were glorified as victories. The Quran warns against this misuse. True guidance is for those who seek it sincerely, not for those who turn revelation into a battlefield for personal pride. The Quran warns against sectarianism and ego-driven rivalry. It says, Baghyan Bainahum, 2:1-3. Divisions arose from the desire to overpower one another, not from any deficiency in revelation.
The same Quran that forbids insulting others' idols was twisted into a tool for insulting one another's ancestors and sectarian leaders. This mentality of my sect is greater, my elders superior, is precisely what the Quran condemns. True guidance lies in Wallahu yahdi man yasha'u ila siratim mustaqim. 2:1-3. Whoever sincerely seeks guidance, without rivalry or arrogance, finds it in the Quran. The straight path is one of unity, free from divisions and sectarian pride. If Muslims were to agree on a single principle, that in matters of deen, the only authority and proof is the Book of God, then all sectarian differences would vanish. The Quran itself is sufficient, clear, and decisive.
False pride and the straight path. The Quran makes it clear that mere desire for guidance is not enough. Arrogance and false pride prevent a person from walking the Sirati Mustaqim. It says, Wallahu yahdi man yasha'u ila siratim mustaqim. 2:13. Whoever sincerely seeks guidance, free from ego and rivalry, finds it in the Quran. But the Quran immediately sets a condition. Am hasibtum an tadkhulul jannah. 2:14. Do you think entry into paradise is automatic, simply by claiming guidance? The straight path is not a shortcut to heaven. It requires struggle, sacrifice, and steadfastness. Thus, the Quran warns against the illusion that one can cling to personal pride, use revelation for sectarian disputes, and still expect to reach paradise. True guidance demands humility, sincerity, and submission to divine law. The price of paradise, struggle, and sacrifice. The Quran dismantles the false assumption that entry into paradise is effortless. It asks, Am hasibtum an tadkhulul jannah. 2:14. Do you think you will enter paradise without passing through the trials faced by those before you? It describes their journey. Massattumul ba'sa'u wad-barra'u wa-zulzilu. 2:14. Hardship struck them, adversity surrounded them, and they were shaken to their core. The trials were so severe that even the messenger and his companions cried out, Meta Nasrullah. 2:14. When will God's help come? The answer was given, Ala inna Nasrullahi qareeb. 2:14. Divine help is near, but it comes only after perseverance through struggle, sacrifice, and steadfastness. Thus, paradise is not attained by mere claims or ritual. It demands the khun jigar, the deepest effort, endurance, and sincerity in the face of trials until God's promised help arrives. To say La ilaha is not a mere utterance. It is a declaration of war against every false authority, every oppressive system, every idol of power. As the poet said, Chon mi guyam musalmanam bilarzam, janam mushkilati la ilaha ra. When I say I am a Muslim, I tremble because I know the hardships of La ilaha. This is the path where every worldly force rises in opposition. Unlike worldly powers that seek allies and compromises, the Quranic system cannot compromise with falsehood. La ilaha means absolute negation of all other authorities. Such a revolutionary stance inevitably brings confrontation, upheaval, and trials. The Quran describes Massattumul basa'u wad-barra'u wa-zulzilu. 2:14. Only after enduring these storms does one reach the razor-sharp, hair-thin Sirat al-Mustaqim. Paradise is not reached by slogans or claims. It is attained through the blood, sweat, and sacrifice of those who walk the perilous path of La ilaha, steadfast until divine help arrives. Ala inna nasrullahi qareeb. 2:14. The Quran makes it clear that paradise is not granted simply by professing belief. أَحَسِبَ النَّاسُ أَنْ يُتْرَكُوا أَنْ يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ. 2:9-2. Do people think they will be left alone just because they say we believe without being tested? Faith must be proven through trials. Similarly, أَمْ حَسِبْتُمْ أَنْ تَدْخُلُوا الْجَنَّةَ وَلَمَّا يَعْلَمِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا مِنْكُمْ وَيَعْلَمَ الصَّابِرِينَ. 3:1-4-2. Do you think you will enter paradise before God knows who among you strive and who remain steadfast?
The Quran emphasizes that belief is not a verbal claim, but a lived reality. It is tested in the furnace of hardship, in the battlefield of struggle, and in the patience of endurance. Only when faith is proven through action, sacrifice, and perseverance does the promise of paradise become real.
Jihad and the conditions for paradise. The Quran explains that paradise is not attained by mere claims of faith. Every breath is weighed, every action is measured. It says, أَمْ حَسِبْتُمْ أَن تُتْرَكُوا وَلَمَّا يَعْلَمِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا مِنْكُمْ وَلَمْ يَتَّخِذُوا مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ وَلَا رَسُولِهِ وَلَا الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَلِيجَةً. Do you think you will be left alone without God knowing who among you truly strive in his cause, and who refrain from forming alliances with those opposed to divine values? The Quran sets two conditions. First, readiness for jihad, the struggle against falsehood and oppression, even under the shadow of the sword. Second, loyalty, not compromising with forces whose ideology contradicts the divine system. A system founded on truth cannot coexist with falsehood. It must remain pure and uncompromised. The Quran paints a vivid picture of the battlefield where faith was tested to its limits. In the Battle of Ahzab, the Prophet stood with his companions, facing overwhelming forces. The verse says, إِذْ جَاءُوكُمْ مِنْ فَوْقِكُمْ وَمِنْ أَسْفَلَ مِنْكُمْ. Enemies came upon them from above and below, surrounding them with hardship and danger. The situation was so dire that وَإِذْ زَاغَتِ الْأَبْصَارِ, eyes grew wide in shock, and وَبَلَغَتِ الْقُلُوبُ الْحَنَاجِرَ, hearts leapt into throats with fear. Doubts crept in. وَتَظَنُّونَ بِاللَّهِ الظُّنُونَ. Some wondered if the promise of divine victory was truly real. The Quran declares, هُنَالِكَ ابْتُلِيَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَزُلْزِلُوا زِلْزَالًا شَدِيدًا. In that moment, believers were tested and shaken with a severe shaking. This was the furnace in which their faith was purified, proving whether they had the strength to live the elevated life of paradise. Paradise requires the blood of sacrifice. The Quran makes it clear that paradise is not a free gift like the universe around us. It is earned through struggle, sacrifice, and proving oneself worthy of that elevated life. أَمْ حَسِبْتُمْ أَن تُتْرَكُوا وَلَمَّا يَعْلَمِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا مِنْكُمْ. Do you think you will be left alone without God knowing who among you truly strive? Paradise demands training, endurance, and perseverance. Just as in worldly systems, only a few pass through rigorous tests to qualify for the highest ranks. Thousands may enter the process, but only a handful emerge successful after years of preparation. In Quranic terms, those few who endure the furnace of trials and prove themselves steadfast are the mu'minun. The Quran shows that paradise is not granted by mere claims, but by proving oneself through trials. Just as in worldly achievements, only those who endure years of training and pass the hardest tests qualify, so too in the divine system, only those who demonstrate steadfastness, sacrifice, and sincerity are given candidacy for Jannah. It says, وَلَمَّا يَأْتِكُمْ مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ خَلَوْا مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. You must pass through the same valleys of hardship as those before you. And then, أَمْ حَسِبْتُمْ أَن تُتْرَكُوا وَلَمَّا يَعْلَمِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا مِنْكُمْ. God must know who among you truly strive. Thus, the Quran sets the standard. Paradise is for those who prove their worth in the furnace of struggle. Whether on the battlefield like the companions in Ahzab, or in other forms of sacrifice when physical strength does not allow direct combat, the test remains. Only after passing through these crucibles does one receive the certificate of candidacy for Jannah. رَبَّنَا تَقَبَّلْ مِنَّا إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ.